Hello everyone, my name's Peter Shields and on behalf of AirMet Scientific, I'm delighted to welcome you all to today's webinar, Enhancing Workplace Safety, Exploring the Benefits of Respirator Fit Testing and Controlled Negative Pressure. We all understand the paramount importance of workplace safety and the critical role that proper respirator fit testing plays in safeguarding the well-being of our workforce. Today we have the privilege of being joined by two guest presenters, Dr Stephanie Lynch from OHD and Mark Reggers from RESP-FIT, who are experts in this field and bring a wealth of knowledge on the subject. Advancements in technology are continually shaping the landscape of fit testing, and we'll be introducing you to the latest innovation, the QuantiFit 2. This groundbreaking technology represents the cutting edge of fit test evaluation, and we're excited to share its potential benefits with all of you. Stephanie and Mark will be participating in a Q&A segment at the end of the presentation, giving you the opportunity to gain deeper insights in the topics discussed. So I'll now hand over to Stephanie and Mark for the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Peter. That was a really good introduction. I'm glad to follow it. But so yes, I'm Stephanie Lynch, and I'm with OHD, the manufacturer of the QuantiFit 2, and I'm out of Birmingham, Alabama. So I think it's still morning for y'all, so good morning, but it's evening here. And I'm so excited to have Mark. I've worked with Mark closely on the development of RESP-FIT, and it was really cool to watch him launch it, and I'm just thrilled to have him. So we'll just jump right in. Okay, so I really want to start with the basics. I for a long time thought that this slide was maybe not necessary, but after especially starting to work more globally, I feel like it really is, because sometimes what you might think you're doing as far as fit testing isn't really what you could or should be doing. So when you're doing a respirator fit test, you're using some sort of approved protocol, which is going to be a series of exercises to evaluate the fit of a respirator to a specific individual. And that's going to have two really big benefits. It's going to have the ability to verify of that individual on the use of their personal respirator, and then also identifies that specific make, model, style, size, all of those. But there's not one respirator that's going to fit all people, right? So one thing that you really need to make sure you do is you offer a selection of respirators, different models, different sizes, to find that very specific one that's going to be right for each individual employee. I've heard, some people think that maybe when you just do that quick wearer seal check, that's enough, or and I see this less often now, which is really good. And I think maybe it'll even be less often as we move forward. I think the pandemic has raised awareness about respirator fit testing. So one, tiny glimmer about the pandemic, but less and less often I'm seeing where you go into a facility and people are just using respirators and no one's ever been fit tested, and they just knew they had something hazardous, and so they just started introducing respirators, but without that respiratory protection program, which is really, a really critical part, right? So why do we fit test? Well, I would hope anyone who's here is doing a fit test because they really, really care about the health and safety of their employees. Another thing is, like I mentioned with the fit testing, right? That's going to verify an individual's training on the use of their own respirator, because they need to know how to don it, they need to know how to doff it. At the point that they're being fit tested, they should know what its capabilities and limitations are. They should know how to maintain it and use it effectively. But another thing that fit testing can do is provide employees with some amount of peace of mind and control over their ability to protect themselves, right? Because you're empowering them in a way by showing them, walking them through a fit test and showing them their results, that, hey, this respirator is capable of providing you protection. And I think that is a really critical part. I know none of us have extra time ever, but if you ever do have a few extra minutes when you're going through a fit test, to let a person maybe do a readjustment. So, you have your official fit test for record, but something else you can do is have them maybe adjust their mask and run through another fit test, or even just one step, to see if something about how they can get the respirator seated on their face could improve that fit, improve comfort, a combination of the two, of course. But so another reason that we all fit test is because it's also required, right, by a lot of different regulations. And I imagine we're going to see that increasing likely exponentially over the next decade. It's internationally required by ISO. Here in the US, we have OSHA, ANSI, HSE. The French have the INRS. And then, of course, in Australia, you've got your own standard. So I want to hand it over very quickly to Mark to kind of talk about not only the importance of fit testing, but something that's another emerging issue in respiratory protection, which is accreditation schemes, because that's one of Mark's specialties. So Mark, I'm handing it to you.
Thank you to AirMed and OHD allowing RESP-FIT to be involved and continue. Part of our objectives is just that continuous education of the market. So thank you so much for this short little time here. And I guess starting off is highlighting, we're going to be focusing in, or Steph's going to be focusing in on fit testing today and controlled negative pressure. But just to highlight that, fit testing is a part, yes, it's a crucial part, but it is a part of a respiratory protection program. So when I view that in context, if it's a workplace or you're a workplace that's, doing fit testing and you've started with the fit testing, that's good. But think about, in the context that the respirators are being selected correctly, the right filters for the right contaminant that you're dealing with, that your users are physically suitable to wear the respirators that may be required, the training, the issue. So what you're seeing there on the screen is those elements, straight out of 1715. So very common elements of a lot of PPE systems. Just to highlight where fit testing sits, often I use the term where, fit testing is where the rubber hits the road. You can select the right respirator, do the training, but if it just doesn't fit from a compatibility between the respirator style, size, brand, and the individual with all the wonderful characteristics that our wonderful world has, that protection is not going to be there. So just highlighting that role that it does play in that respiratory protection program. And and the existence of RESP-FIT came about pre-pandemic, really off the back of the increase of silicosis and pneumoconiosis, where PPE's been out there, but many of us were seeing in the industry and many in the hygiene community where a lot of best attempts and efforts when it comes to fit testing, but there wasn't that known benchmark or consistent level that workplaces are able to refer back to what makes a competent fit test, or what should a fit tester be able to demonstrate. So you've got some elements there from the ISO standard 16975-3, which will be getting adopted as an Australian standard at some point. So certainly looking forward to that improvement of information and level of detail in the standard. But fit testing is more than just knowing how to use the machine. When you delve into the process of a fit test, the exercises are a part of it, but that understanding of the donning and the doffing, the user seal checks, what is the purpose of a fit test, some of the things that Steph alluded to. So just highlighting, there are these benchmarks that essentially what RESP-FIT is based around. We look at the Queensland Silica Code of Practice, the elements that they list are essentially the headings from that ISO standard. So certainly being fantastic to see more in industry, from that regulatory point of view, refer back to some of these key elements of what makes a competent person. If you haven't heard of RESP-FIT, I'm sure many of you have, but I guess our real objective is whoever's doing your fit testing, that they know what they're doing and competent to have that fit test outcome to be a reliable outcome result, whatever that may be. And so for those that may not have heard of RESP-FIT, we're about, improving the awareness and the importance of making the role of a fit tester be more known about. It is a professional undertaking, or there's a level of knowledge that should be there. So I definitely recommend, if you're not familiar with what we are as far as being part of the AIOH, is go check out the website, but really about providing a benchmark training syllabus and this accreditation process as a way, not the only way, so certainly lots of ways people can demonstrate competence, but certainly a known way within industry by regulators that if you're accredited to CMP methodology or one of the other methodologies, whatever it may be, it's demonstration of that competence and knowledge, and certainly a lot of good resources there for workplaces that are, maybe introducing fit testing the first time or are for fit testers as well. So just appreciate, these kind of events that AirMet and OHD are running, just to continue that education of, industries and markets and workplaces in Australia when it comes to fit testing and the controlled negative pressure method. So definitely, I'd say probably a lesser known method in Australia. So I'm always, explaining to quite a few people this other method has got some really great benefits that I'm sure Steph will be going through today to help make that decision about what method is going to be right for your workplace, whatever that may be. So thank you for the time, Steph, and enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really do appreciate that. I really have enjoyed being a part of it, and I hope we do see an increase just for me to be able to get some more assessing experience, because I have enjoyed that part of it. The way the system's set up is really cool. You can do everything virtually. It's through a video, and it's a well-run process. And so these accreditation schemes are coming out kind of all over the place. Fit to Fit is another one right now, and it's started in the UK, and it's sort of making its way across Europe at the moment. And I think that eventually the United States might follow. Right now, there are some courses you can take, but they're not anything near the level of RESP-FIT with that organization, which is something we really need. Another thing I wanted to mention was, so this is kind of an emerging issue, those accreditation schemes, but I saw on one of Mark's slides about the difference between a fit factor and an assigned protection factor. And that's something very critical for respirator fit test administrator to know, but it's also something that ends up being very dependent on your regulation and the stuff that you're referencing. So it's kind of an issue that, again, I just think is kind of an emerging thing with respirator fit testing specifically, but just respiratory protection in general. How are we defining those assigned protection factors? How does that translate into those fit factors? And it's especially important to me because you'll see as we move through the presentation that the way that you get the fit factor using controlled negative pressure is very different from the way that you get it if you are familiar with ambient aerosol, but we'll get there. Okay. So there are two overarching types of respirator fit testing. There's qualitative fit testing, and then there's quantitative fit testing. And I'm actually starting to believe at this point that we really did just want to make it very confusing, because we have qualitative and quantitative, and then within the quantitative methods, we have CNP and CNC, at least here in the US. So it becomes very confusing. So qualitative fit testing is going to be where typically you put a hood over a wearer, they're wearing their respirator. You're first going to make sure that they actually can taste whatever agent you're using or can react to it. The most popular two methods are saccharin and Bitrex, so one that tastes very sweet and one that tastes very bitter, but there are a couple others that are approved in different areas. There's a banana oil, which has the strong smell of bananas, and then there's an irritant smoke method that actually uses what is technically a toxin to get you to react to it. But it relies on that wearer to then sense the agent inside the respirator. And so if you're able to sense that, so taste that agent inside the respirator, your respirator fit is deemed inadequate. You've failed that test. It is going to be limited in its use, typically just to half mask respirators. So those respirators that need a 100 passing fit factor or below, or have that assigned protection factor of 10 or below. So qualitative fit testing, some of the benefits there are that it's clearly going to be much less expensive and it requires very little maintenance, but some of the downsides there are that it's subjective, it's not going to have automated documentation, which ends up being something very critical, especially if you're managing a respiratory protection program, right? So some upsides, some downsides. Okay, quantitative fit testing is going to use an actual machine to in some way measure leakage. It's going to provide you with a numerical representation of that fit to that wearer, the fit of that respirator to that wearer, in the form of a fit factor. And it can be used on any respirator. Just for some clarity, with controlled negative pressure right now, controlled negative pressure cannot be used on those filtering face piece respirators, so those disposable respirators. But a quantitative method can be performed. Okay. There are two most common methods of quantitative respirator fit testing. There's controlled negative pressure, that's with OHD, the QuantiFit, and the QuantiFit 2. We utilize air as the challenge agent. And what we do is we create an actual controlled negative pressure within the respirator face piece that is associated with a modeled breathing rate. So you're thinking of a person kind of, if they could somehow take a continuous 8-second inhale that sort of mimicked a person who's under some amount of moderate stress, we do that within the face piece. Ambient aerosol be either your TSI or your Accutech, and they're going to utilize ambient aerosols in the air as the challenge agent. If you don't have enough ambient aerosol, then you can produce it with a particle generator, and then it's carried out by actually probing the face piece, or either they place the probe like in an adapter behind the filter so that you're able to count the number of ambient aerosol particles in the respirator, and you're counting them out. And so theoretically, any that you're counting inside should be the result of leakage. So what we want to focus on for the purposes of of this presentation is the lesser known technology, which is our technology at OHD and my baby. So I did research on CMP, on controlled negative pressure, respirator fit testing more than 20 years ago. So I've been familiar and stayed sort of in respirator fit testing when I did industrial hygiene, actually did qualitative respirator fit testing for 2,500 employees at a hospital. And this was when I was not a well-trained fit tester. And I did not recognize that the fact that I was never failing anyone was probably in a very poorly run respirator fit testing program, right? I thought that I'm just passing everyone because I'm awesome, I guess. But looking back, I know now that hospital employees were highly incentivized to just pass their test, because if they pass their test, then they get to go back to work, and they want to go back to work. So some of the issues that you can have with that qualitative testing is, you know, I hate to call it cheating because that makes it sound bad when I don't think the intent is bad, right? It was a lack of training, a lack of understanding, you know, of the importance of fit testing, and then a poorly trained respirator fit test administrator, right? So I'm now a hopefully very well trained respirator fit test administrator, for your sake, I guess, and the sake of the education you're receiving. But the QuantiFit 2 is going to be the instrument that's the newest iteration of our controlled negative pressure method. We've actually been around, like I said, for 20, 30 years, and been in regulation, at least in the States, for 20 years, and we're really starting to get a footing globally, and we're really working on that. That's part of my job, is to get out there and tell people about controlled negative pressure, so they can figure out if it will work for them. So I mentioned that we use a controlled negative pressure to directly measure respirator leakage. So we're literally measuring the amount of air in cc's per minute that are leaking into the respirator, because we know that every respirator leaks, right? That's why it's given that assigned protection factor. That's the amount of protection you can expect for 95% of the time, whatever. We developed our technology in response to issues that were found with ambient aerosol technology. There's a lot of stuff that has to do with particle migration, and are you counting all of the particles when you're competing with the person's lungs and their breathing. So that's how we got developed. And the negative pressure, like I said, is mimicking that sustained inhale. So it's associated with this breathing rate that was identified. So instead of having a user to get to a moderate low work rate, you'd have to have a user sit there and breathe heavily or whatever, and then you'd have to create that sustain for 8 seconds to do our test effectively. So we just do that for the user so that they're able to sit there comfortably and we can rock through the test. This is a graphic of how our technology works. So you have one side, it's a single side adapter. They can actually all be contained within one adapter, but that single side is going to be the blue tube, and it's going to close off the adapter, those breathing ports, so that you're able to actually create that negative pressure within there. It's going to allow that mask to be sealed. One thing that you always want to make sure, any of your wearers, if you're going through a controlled negative pressure test, you want to make sure that you're able to communicate with your wearers that they're still able to breathe. Like, if sometimes people, they go to hold their breath and they think, oh gosh, the machine's going to keep me from breathing. No, just tell them to go, okay, go ahead and breathe, because you just breathe, it'll abort the test and you're fine. So that adapter goes off, it's going to seal off the respirator and the breathing tubes. Now that's accomplished with the machine automatically sensing the user's breath hold. So previously it was done with a trigger button, and before that with the Fit Tester 3000, which is the very first iteration of controlled negative pressure, we actually had a squeeze bowl that would close off that diaphragm on the single side. And then on that dual side, you're going to have one tube that's removing the air from the respirator to keep that controlled negative pressure constant. And then it's actually going to measure with the other side of that dual tube the actual leakage, again in cc's per minute, that's coming into the respirator. Now we convert that into a fit factor using that leak rate and that modeled breathing rate, and we'll get into that and how it's calculated and how it's quite different, right, from the ambient aerosol method, which you may be familiar with. And the fit factors you see aren't going to exactly be the same. So the benefits that are associated with utilizing controlled negative pressure are that the fit test is really fast. And then it's also able to be used anywhere. So because we're using air as our challenge agent, you can take the machine outside, You don't have to have any environmental requirements. We don't have any consumables. So if you're familiar with ambient aerosol or CNC, you know you have to have the alcohol, you have to have the wick, you need to have the particles. You probably need to have the particle generator in case you're in an environment that's going to need more particles. We don't need any of that. We just need air. So even when you go to a big expo hall and you want to see a demonstration of a fit test, you can come to our booth and we will show you a fit test anywhere, inside, outside, clean environment, dirty environment. And then of course, we're also scientifically validated. We did a lot of research to establish our breathing rates, and we did a lot of research to establish our actual fit test protocols. And we continue that. We're always looking to improve, and clearly there are areas where we can. So as far as the experience you're going to get if you were to invest in or look at a QuantiFit 2, one of the coolest things that I think we have is battery power. So we have optional battery packs that you're going to be able to just slip into the back. So now we use those when we go to the different trade shows, and we're able to just carry it around and do fit tests wherever we want. We've got Bluetooth capability, color touchscreens, that auto start functionality. So when a wearer initiates a test, or the fit test administrator initiates it for them, once that test sequence starts running, whatever it is for your area, your specific protocol that you've selected based on your regulation that you're following, then that wearer is going to be able to just rock through that test. They're going to, once they take their breath and hold it, the machine's going to recognize they've done that, and it's going to go ahead and start that step, and it's going to rock and roll into the next one, and so forth and so on. You've got on-screen signature capture. A lot of these things we developed sort of in response to stuff that was going on with COVID. So we really wanted to make sure that people could have the ability to still maintain their respirator fit test program without sacrificing any safety, because we know when we put a respirator on for fit testing, no matter what method you're using, then technically, the wearer's not being protected because there's an operator there, and their mask has now been altered in some way, whether it's with the adapters for CMP or a probe for CNC. And then the operator's not being protected because of course there's a person there in the same thing, right? They're just going to be releasing air. So we really wanted to make it as user-friendly as we could under the circumstances, and hopefully that kind of carries forward. You are able to, of course, use software just like all the other methods, and then you can perform multiple tests simultaneously, which is nice. So that battery I really touched on a lot, but so it's a rechargeable battery. Once you slip it into that machine, it can charge in the QuantiFit 2, or there's a separate charging cable that you can use. It says 4+ hours of runtime, but I just went to the US Navy and did a fit test mission over multiple days, and my battery lasted me a day and a half. So maybe they did that just to be very, very conservative, but it's a really good battery and you can get a lot of test time on it. I guess that would be if you're just testing continuously. Maybe you can only get 4 hours. But none of those environmental restrictions. You're not going to have to be tethered to a power cord. You're going to be able to go get your testing done wherever you need to get it done. Like that's why the Navy, called me to go do their fit test mission, was to be able to take some QuantiFits out on the deck and run through testing. They actually previously used a portable generated aerosol device. So another thing we're really proud of is that LED touchscreen. We honestly did that to just keep up with the times, of course, and then animations that walk you through each step of your protocol. That one on the top, that's our Navy protocol, and then the one in the middle is actually our avatar for the HSE, so in the UK, and then the bottom one is probably our most common avatar used for what is our most frequently utilized protocol, which is our read-on protocol, which we should be walking through. So I mentioned that the way that you get a controlled negative pressure fit test is just very different from what you're going to see with ambient aerosol. So with ambient aerosol, you've got a concentration that you're reading out in the environment, in that ambient air, and clearly that can go, very high. You could go ahead and get a super high ambient particle count. And then you're counting inside the respirator, which theoretically could, if you had a very poor fitting mask, also get very high. But so there's variability in both those numbers, and it's not odd to see a relatively high fit factor. So it's basically on a range of 0 to technically infinity, but I would say 100,000. I think 100,000 is where they would tell you to watch out. You might have a suspiciously high fit factor, right? But the way the controlled negative pressure works, we're using a modeled breathing rate. And so like the modeled breathing rate for our read-on protocol, that's going to have that fixed value. So there's no variability in that top number for us. And then we're dividing that by the actual leakage that you're getting into the respirator. And if you just think about it, if particles can leak in, so if you get like one particle going through, you can only think how many more molecules of air that would be, right? So the fit factors that you're going to see associated with a controlled negative pressure fit test are going to be much lower, much more conservative than what you're going to see with the ambient aerosol method. So you want to be prepared for that. And that's just a function of how we developed our fit factor differently. You know, and unfortunately, a lot of the, I'm trying to think, like assigned protection value, all these things, a lot of the research was based around ambient aerosol. So we're very slowly trying to make meaningful difference, you know, in how regulations perceive CMP and how different mask manufacturers understand that the fit factors can be very different. Okay, so that breathing rate that you're going to see is expressed in liters per minute. That is simply because we would not want to be talking about breathing rates in, you know, thousandths of liters per minute. So then our leak rates are expressed in cubic centimeters per minute. And that's just because you wouldn't want to be talking about, you know, it makes it the easiest way to talk about. And so I did this just some easy math using the breathing rate from that read-on protocol that I mentioned that we will dive in a little bit more. And so that 53.8 liters per minute, that's going to become the 53,800 cc's per minute. And if you were to divide that by that leak rate, expressed there, just the 1 cc, you know, per minute, then you're going to get that 1,000 fit factor. Another interesting thing about all of the different technologies is we do this math to get that individual exercise fit factor. And then at the end, we all do the same thing to get our overall fit factor, which is we create a harmonic mean. A harmonic mean is just, instead of doing a straight average, it just places greater weight on lower values. And that's just so that fit factor can be more conservative in its evaluation of fit, right? Which we would want from a health and safety perspective. So this is how the ambient aerosol method is doing it. They're getting that concentration out divided by the concentration in, and that concentration outside is the number of particles in that sample outside of the respirator, and then the concentration in. And I've already mentioned that that's where you can get a lot more variability and a lot higher fit factors. So I mentioned they could go to about 100,000, or at least that's where you might hear that you have suspiciously high fit factors. Whereas ours, if you looked at the math having to do with that read-on protocol from that breathing rate, the highest fit factor you could ever see would be a 26,900, and that would be with absolutely no air leaking into the respirator. And we all know, like I already mentioned, respirators do leak, right? Oh, so here's where we're talking about the individual fit factors. So when we look at an overall fit factor, which for some reason it looks like I don't have the actual formula there, but it would be that N over each of your individual fit factor exercises added up together over 1, which is just confusing. But just know that the way that you do the overall fit factor is with that harmonic mean. And it's very appropriate for looking at ratios, which is what we're talking about. So one really good way to think about it when you're looking at the ambient aerosol method, you're thinking about the ratio of, you know, the concentration of particles found outside the mask to the ratio of the concentration found inside the mask. Well, when you look at controlled negative pressure, you're looking at the ratio of all of the air inhaled over that air that is possibly contaminated, that came in. And so same ratio. And so this is a very good way to look at those values. And they're going to, like I said, place greater weight on those lower values. So it worsens the impact of very small outliers and then lowers the impact of very large outliers, especially when you're only considering the overall fit factor for whether a mask is a suitable fit. Then this is going to help reduce some of the impact of when you have maybe one single exercise that gets a very high score, but it's going to increase the impact of any exercise you get that has a very low score, which is what we would want to do in this instance. So here's an overall fit factor example. So if you went through a read-on protocol test, you would see your individual exercise fit factors. So here it's a 1,000, 500, 750, 1250, 1500. If you did the quick math on that, then you would know that if it was just a regular mean, it would be 1,000. But because of how you do the math with the overall fit factor utilizing that harmonic mean, then you only get an overall fit factor of 862. And if we had used a little bit numbers with, one being much lower or one being much higher, then it would exacerbate the impact of those lower ones. So the read-on protocol that I've been talking about so much is what's associated with controlled negative pressure fit testing. And the way that that protocol works is it's a 5-step protocol. And the first step is going to be just facing forward and just representative of just normal wear. And then the second step is going to be bending over, looking, at the pull of gravity. The third step is going to be, it's kind of our weird one, but you're going to be shaking your head and forcefully exhaling or talking or yelling to see if that mask has the ability to reseat on the wearer's face. And then our last 2 steps are why the read-on protocol is called read-on. And that's because you actually completely remove the mask and you put it back on and readjust it. And that just shows you do that twice. So every read-on test has 3 donnings of the respirator. And that's really important to show a user's ability to repeatedly and consistently, effectively don their respirator. Because we mentioned the real value, or one of the real values of respirator fit testing, is to verify that training. So, I wish we were all in person and we could do like a demonstration, but I have what maybe, I don't know, the second best thing, which is I have a quick video showing a wearer. This is actually the president of OHD, Luke Allen, but he's going to go through a test, a read-on protocol test, and you'll be able to see how quick and easy it is. So let's see how it goes. You'd see Luke don his respirator, adjust it how he felt like it was going to give him a good seal, and then he would just go ahead. The machine would automatically sense that he had done that, and then he would be able to just stand there for that 8-second duration while the machine ran that test. Then for the second step, he would bend over and he's going to just make sure that that gravity's not pulling on the respirator to the point of impacting fit, and then take his breath and hold it, and then the machine's going to automatically sense that that's happened, and it'll be able to go through the test, that 8-second measurement. Then for that third step, he's going to shake his head, he's going to exhale forcefully or talk or yell, and that's going to test the ability of the mask to reseat. Then he's going to take his breath and hold it, and the machine again is going to automatically sense that that's happened. It's going to run its 8-second measurement, make sure he's still got a good seal, and then that mask reseated to his face. And then, like I mentioned, that 4th and 5th step are going to be those redonnings. But yeah, he takes off his mask, he's going to be able to put it on, and Luke is a very experienced fit tester, because this is what we do for a living. So he's going to get his mask back on, get that good seal, and he's going to run through the test. So yeah. I can't thank you all enough, and I think we're open now for questions. Hopefully those would be in the chat.
Thanks, Steph. Can this system be used for close fitting PAPR face pieces, e.g. clean space systems?
Yes, that was an easy one.
It's an easy one. And I think I can answer this next one with the annual calibration for the QuantiFit 2. What is involved? Well, I haven't actually done it myself, but I know we're an accredited calibration centre for the QuantiFit 2. So in our Melbourne workshop, we have all the equipment to lead calibrations locally and quickly. There's no need for sending it out of the country or anything like that. One thing I haven't been sure on is there be different parameters set when testing for different cartridges, specifically stack filters, i.e. gas or vapor?
I mean, it can be very subjective. So we have some people who prefer to, so OSHA here, at least the way it works is like, that's kind of a bare minimum. So as long as you're going in the direction where you're challenging the respirator more, then you're able to do that. So some users feel more comfortable utilizing our higher challenge pressures. So that would be like some of our firefighters, they're going to use the SCBA protocol instead. They're not obligated to, but if they feel like we really want to challenge the pressure better, then you can do that. So it's really more of a function of the use case. If you feel like your users are going to be faced with a really high, challenge while they're wearing the respirator, or a really high challenge from your filters, which I hope you're not getting, then you could theoretically use a higher challenge pressure.
Is it intrinsically safe? I can answer that one. No, it's not intrinsically safe, but it does have the benefit of being able to be used in any environment. So it's it's on the back of a ute or out in the field or anywhere. So here's another one. What test fit is required if people have facial hair?
Oh, so I'm very old school, and according to our regulation, if you have facial hair that's going to interfere with that seal, then you shouldn't even be performing the fit test. The fit test is invalid. The use of that respirator is no. So we require, I mean, we don't require, OHD doesn't have any, I guess, skin in the game as far as, but the regulation would likely dictate that you need to have a clean face where that respirator is going to seal. Otherwise, you need to use something like a loose fitting PAPR, which then it's going to offer a lower level of protection, but it wouldn't require fit testing.
In the event a respirator you're face fitting isn't listed within the QuantiFit 2, but the face fit utilizes the same attachment and would follow the same protocol, can it still be used?
I mean, I would say yes, but you also can just add a respirator in manually. So if you've got the attachments that are working, I mean, this is like a weird case to me to think of attachments working, but the respirator's not in there. That means we have adapters for that mask, but somehow, you know what? Also just email me so that I can have it put into the QuantiFit, because I can do that. But yes, theoretically, if you have the adapters that are working, you can even add a respirator that we wouldn't have. But if we have adapters to that respirator, then like we should just add that respirator.
Yeah.
So let me know that situation, and I would be glad to get it added to our database.
Yeah. Okay, great. Is there any chance for condensation build-up in the tubing which will affect the readings or results?
You should not be seeing that because of how the test is run. You'll see that a lot with ambient aerosol and with CNC, but because the way our test works is the user takes that breath and holds it before the machine is doing anything, then you shouldn't be getting any buildup of condensation, because once the test ends, test supported, or once the user just starts breathing, then the adapter ports open up and the person would just be breathing through those adapter ports. So you shouldn't be seeing any buildup at all, unless you're taking the instrument, like from in severe temperature changes or something, which, by the way, if you are doing that, then you need to redo your daily verification, but that's neither here nor there, I guess.
And do you have a full range of adapters to suit the SCBA used in Australia?
Oh, so what's the SCBA used in Australia?
Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have a wide range of SCBA attachments. Our main user base is fire. So firefighters, we've cornered the majority of the market here in the US for firefighters. And we're coming at you, Australia. We're coming for your firefight.
Okay. The next one, do you have any information on changing to the fast test as per the amended OSHA protocol? We use the quantitative test CNC with port account and are looking to switch over.
I have no idea if Australia is looking at those fast fit protocols. We've already accepted them here in the US, but those are specific to, so all fit test protocols are specific to the technology that you're going to use. So those fast fit protocols are specific to CNC. So Mark, do you know if they're looking at the inclusion of those fast fit protocols?
Broadly, most fit testers are already using the modified protocols because most of it uses the OSHA protocol, whether it's the long one or the short one. So I'd say it's very widespread accepted, from the chats I have with different regulators as a known method. When it first came out, definitely got a lot of questions. It went through the same multi-year validation process as any other protocol that's approved. So certainly it's it's being used in Australia. Like any protocol, got to follow the protocol and be competent fit tester. To get that reliable result. That helps.
And that's so true. I mean, I mentioned my personal experience, but it really is, every test can be done badly. So you do want to make sure that your fit tester knows what they're doing.
And we've got another question. Is there any risk of transferring COVID from one person to another if using the same tubing and adapters? Would you need to clean them between uses?
The tubing, no, because I mentioned how that test runs and where the air is going to go. The adapters could have some amount of surface contamination. So I would feel like if you're still concerned about COVID, we actually offer pure adapters that were designed in response to COVID. And so they not only, especially if I hope I'm not like minimizing COVID by saying this, but especially if you just need to have the perception of really protecting your employees, then these adapters come entirely apart. They're able to be completely either submerged or totally wiped down, whatever you want to do. And then you can also insert a little 95% efficiency filter into that adapter. You could even change that every time, to just show show your users that your wearers that you're just doing something to protect them. So if that's something that's important to you, here in the States, I think we've just given up on COVID. So I don't know if people are still doing anything to protect themselves, but we do offer that. And actually, the pure adapters are a really good option just generally. It's nice that they can be taken apart and wiped completely down. And then if you do have that issue of wanting to, be in an abundance of caution, you can put that 95% efficiency filter into that adapter. So no, there's not a huge risk, but I see how people get concerned, I don't know. Unless your user's sitting there licking your adapters after, which they should not do that. We do not advise adapters.
Okay. Well, that looks like it's all the questions. Thanks everyone for attending today. I'm sure you found it informative and interesting. So if you've got any further questions on the OHD QuantiFit 2 or RESP-FIT, please feel free to contact our local air representative. Finally, thanks Steph and Mark for your time today. Steph, we really appreciate you accommodating our time difference by presenting late at night, and it was an extremely interesting presentation.
I'm going to convince you to come to Australia.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.